So, hi everyone. I'm Stephen Darrah, the founder of Fueled. Founded Fueled in 2018 to be, I suppose, somewhat of a disruptor in the insurance space. We focus entirely on helping startup and scale up companies from pretty much start to exit with journey-ready insurance is what we call it. So, your very first liability policy and your very last, hopefully, IPO-related insurance product to see you exit to. Um, we manage just over 4 million of insurance premiums, have around about 1,000 clients now. And I suppose we're proudly, albeit unintentionally, bootstrapped. So I guess today is talking to you about what bootstrapping a company can look like for you guys, and whether or not it's an alternative, I suppose, to the typical path that is almost forced on most people nowadays by the space. So yeah.
Yeah. So obviously everyone's intention here is to fundraise, but we wanted to bring someone in that didn't go down that traditional path because it might give you food for thought on how you can build a sustainable bootstrapped business, which is still highly successful. But Steve, I'm actually going to start at the end because you jumped in a bit early and you overheard
Sorry.
some of that stuff. No, all good, all good. About PR. I saw that you got some PR in the Financial Times. So how did that come about? Does it resonate, some of the stuff that you heard Lulu saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be completely transparent. The piece in the Financial Times that was written about us was purely a trauma response, actually, to our R&D tax credits claim. So we were unsuccessful and very, very dramatically declined for R&D tax credits. And I think the rationale that was used by the innovation team at HMRC about why we were declined was that innovation doesn't happen in insurance, and we don't believe that it fits the sort of the data and the data science mold that you would typically find in other industries. We challenged it a number of times over a period of 2 years, and ultimately had our very first claim rejected. And for context, the very first claim that we were putting in was around about 19 grand. It wasn't a lot, definitely not a lot in the grand scheme of things. Our later claims would have been something like 130, 160, and last year's something like 210. So it was a massive rejection for us at the time, despite being I suppose, a nominal amount compared to what was due to come. And as I said, we fought that over a 2-year period, and ultimately had our sort of final decline letter. Once we received the decline letter, they then threatened to sue us due to faulty tax returns or something along those lines. It was all very daft. And I publicly spoke about that on LinkedIn as well as kind of grouped together with another couple of founders that had gone through a similar sort of process, albeit in different industries. And throughout that process, the post naturally gained some traction, particularly with other startup founders going through similar processes. And I actually had a Financial Times journalist reach out to me to have an interview about our story and share the woes, as it were. So by happen chance of that rejection, we ended up getting some press pieces on it, which was cool. I'd much rather have not had the press releases in favor of gaining the tax claim, but we are where we are. So I guess the long-winded message in that is that by I suppose building in the open, or being open and transparent and calling out the bullshit when you see it is really important. And through having connected with it, and I guess this goes back to what Lulu was saying there, is reaching out to these individuals on LinkedIn and making sure that you're known to them, and that they follow your posts back and see the stuff that you're promoting or posting is really important, because it can lead to those news articles that you can start to use for a bit of traction too.
Did the article in the Financial Times was the results? Did you get any new customers? Did you like claw back some of the R&D money through?
No, I probably turned into more of an R&D agony aunt after that more than anything else. I think all we had was with other startups reach out to us and other founders being like, "Oh my God, this happened to us too," and let's share war stories and the like, which was cool. It was all expanding networks and connections and stuff. They may turn into paying customers for sure, which will be really nice. But I think ultimately, and I'll touch on this later as well, we've very much positioned ourselves to be a supporter of the industry of startups and scale ups in general. So yeah, I'm always so keen to give my time to other founders in whatever sense, even if it's just a 20-minute chat here and there about something that hasn't gone quite right or something that they want some help with. So anyone that reaches out to me to share these stories or to ask for advice, I'm happy to give it.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take us back now to what you originally touched on at the beginning, which was the bootstrapping journey, which started for you with a failed fundraise, which you were quite open about on LinkedIn, back to your point about being transparent. So can you just give an overview of what happened with the raise?
Yeah, I guess it's important to start on why we were raising, and I guess where the first mistake was made, from our side. Um, the insurance industry, I suppose, is notoriously competitive. Um, everyone is scrapping around for the same types of businesses, and every renewal you seem of an insurance policy, you're in competition with some form or another. And when I started fielding late 2018, and then moving right through, I suppose, into the COVID era, fundraising was just everywhere. Crazy valuations, massive amounts being raised, and on quite ludicrous terms for the most part as well. So actually, the rationale for us fundraising at the time wasn't necessarily because we needed the money. It was more because everyone else was doing it, and it was seen as the thing that we should then be going on to do. Otherwise, we'd get left behind. And I lived with this, at the time, this constant fear of being left behind. Um, when we see all of our competitors raising money at silly valuations and going on to do these things and speaking about it so publicly in the press, and everyone lauding their fundraisers as the these are almost these exceptional activities that doesn't happen. It was just such a crazy time. So when we moved into, I suppose, our first attempt at fundraising, it was in March 2020. We pitched ourselves. We were actually under a different brand at the time, which I didn't even think looked that good. But we were still given an offer of £1 million, right? So it was our seed round, £1 million, from I suppose a well-known investor in the insurance space at the time. When we received that offer, I sat down with my I've got two Neds within the business. I sat down with my two Neds, and we went through the offer and term sheet, and it was just atrocious. We would lose almost all control of the business. Any decision that we would make needed to be approved by them. Naturally, someone gets added to the board. We then had to pay a fee, which I know is quite common, but at the time, I think it was 80 or 90K a year fee to the investor. It felt more like a loan over a period of 5 years than it did anything else. So we just decided to decline it. It was the only offer we got on the table. The remainder, I suppose, of that round was horrific. It was just meeting after meeting, with quite a lot of VCs at the time, had this insane God complex. I mean, there was one meeting I recall in particular where I was called to a third meeting with the wider board of this investment group. And I remember getting an absolute dressing down from a recent Loughborough grad in his first job. And I just remember him really, it felt like almost a personal attack. And at the end of it, I just asked him, I was like, what's your experience in running a business? Have you ever done it before? And he goes, I qualified from Loughborough last year and data analytics and all this shit. And I just remember thinking at the time, like, why am I wasting all this time, all these sleepless nights, constantly refining the pitch deck, the business plan, the investment memorandum to speak to like knobheads like this? And it was at that point I was just like, I'm done with fundraising. I refused to do it. So whilst it felt like a failed attempt, I think it was a mutual agreement that it wasn't right for us at the time. Um, I would also add to that I don't necessarily think we were ready to take on money either, which is a really important point, I think. Um, and I'll hark back to the reason why we were raising this because everyone else was. That doesn't necessarily mean that we were ready for it at all. And I think if we'd been given £1 million, whilst I know I'm relatively good at spending someone else's money, I think I would have made way more mistakes than what I have done to date. Um, the bootstrap model for us has meant that we've been able to A/B test an awful lot of what we've done in a very small manner. So when we've made a mistake or not necessarily done something well, it's not cost us a lot. we've been able to address it quickly, move on to the next thing, make a small change, and then go on to go about it in the right way. So, yeah, I mean, I guess, like I said, I could probably talk for hours and hours about why I didn't raise at the time, and why I don't think it's right to raise for a lot of companies at the time. And I'm not going to discourage anyone from going down that route, because I think it's such a I think it's one of those things where if it works for you, it works for you. But and it also means that you're in this sort of constant cycle of fundraising. A seed or a series A might be a really clever thing for you guys to do. But sorry, Siri's about to interrupt me. So it might be a really clever thing for you guys to do. But when you go on to raise that series A or series B, you're stuck in that cycle. Then you're always stuck. Having to adhere to the terms of your very first term sheet, and all the decisions that you make, you kind of drag those through with you to the next stages. Sorry, I've waffled, but I hope you see my point, is that it's not the only course of action to take, just for younger companies.
There's we had Anthony Rose in from Seed Legals, who went through a live term sheet example and picks out some red flags, one of which you mentioned, which is that you have to almost pay the investor like a salary to come in and do the board meetings for you, and they can take quite a high number.
They are not worth that amount either. I can guarantee you that. They are not worth that amount.
He kind of talks about what you can negotiate on, where there is typically some wiggle room, where investors often won't have any wiggle room. So we can send that video around as well if that's helpful. For you, Steve, so you made this mutual decision to not take VC money. What happened next? You were like, okay, now we need to go into sustainable growth mode. So I guess you needed to prioritize. You didn't have £1 million that you could spend, but you had some. Like, what was the actual practical next steps?
Yeah. So being an insurance industry vet, I don't know if I can call myself a vet actually, but I've been in the insurance industry for 15 years now, which is longer than anyone else would want to be in it. That's almost guaranteed. But I've always been, I suppose, naturally risk averse. I've always wanted to be sort of cheeky and playful, and we'll come on to branding later. But I think I've always been risk averse. So, and I talk about other people's money quite a lot. We took a very small amount of angel investment around about the time COVID happened. And we didn't spend it for a year. It was one of those things where I focused way more on customer acquisition and customer retention than spending someone else's money to have us grow. And I think that will probably be a common theme throughout this, right? Is that the most important thing you can do, I believe, if you're bootstrapping, is just focus on customers first. The approach that we then took when we knew money wasn't forthcoming was that we adopted a sort of a manual delivery approach of what we wanted to deliver in a technical format. So I'll elaborate on that. I mentioned before that we sell insurance policies, but we sell insurance policies to customers and companies that change almost weekly. So from an admin perspective, having to constantly challenge and adopt those insurance policies to fit what those businesses were at the time, it was a very admin heavy process. And the intention for raising capital was to build a tech solution that effectively streamlined and automated that admin process. We now have that. At the time we didn't. So what we essentially did is we just laser focused on the customer set that we had, and focused on bringing more customers into that. And then we track and change and adopt these insurance policies to their growth as they continue to grow. So for us, it was nice to not have that distraction of what should we spend this money on, in what courses should we use it. We kind of went in on ourselves and just said, right, well, let's focus on what we can control here. And we spent all of our time with our customers asking what they wanted out of their insurance products, and how they wanted their insurance broker to act, and essentially molded our service model around that. So that's I guess that's the story really, is just focused on customers, and it ultimately it paid dividends. I'll make no secrets that we are a professional services led business. It's not difficult to be an insurance broker. It's just one of those things. Everybody needs insurance. Everybody will buy it. As long as you're approaching these companies at the right time, there's a good chance their renewal date's coming up. It's not difficult to win business insurance, really. then what is difficult is to try and get innovation to fit within that model if you've got no money. So we've got two devs now. We've had two devs for quite a while, and we've very much self-funded the product build. Naturally, it's come at a cost of not growing as quickly as we would like, but it's allowed us, as I said, to focus on that product and really build towards our customers. And the build is still going on. It's 4 years in, but we're adding some like really cool features and stuff now, which is great. We probably could have done it in 12 months if we had the money, but it's just one of those. You make sacrifices to do other things, I guess.
Yeah. When you were doing your fundraise, I guess you had some projections, like 2, 3, 5 year projections of where the business was going to be with the money that you were asking for. How far have you got not taking the money in terms of those projections? Do you reckon you've reached a similar point that you were always intending to reach anyway, but it's taken you a year longer, or have you not got there
Yeah,
yet?
probably. I think if I go back to one of our sort of original pitch decks, we're probably year two of that particular 4-year plan. So, it's probably taken us half the time to grow the speed at which we'd like. But as I alluded to, I think in my sort of opening statements, is that it's allowed us to fail well at certain things and win well on others as well. So I think naturally for us, I think it has really benefited us. I think if you'd have told me at the time this is where we'd be without money, I probably would have had some doubts because, as I said, I was so stuck on the fact that we needed to raise because everyone else was. But actually, when you take money out of the equation, what it allows you to do is actually build a really good, sustainable business that's recession proof to some extent. It was pandemic proof anyway. I've proven that, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Now you're like, what, 5 years in ish. Any lessons? I mean, you've talked about you've learned to fail without spending so much money or succeed. Any like tips or particular stories or examples that you can share that you think would be useful for the group?
Yeah, I do a lot of reading. I'm sure other people do as well, and I think that what that's allowed me to do is to pick up little snippets of things that I'd really like to integrate within the business. I probably stumbled across this book a little bit too late, but there was a book by Ben Horowitz who he talks about what you do is who you are and building brand and culture. And one of the things that he mentions in that book is that a brand is more than just a logo. And what he means by that is that you can have a nice logo that looks good and everyone thinks that's a cool looking brand, but actually the brand is top to bottom. It needs to be around everything, from the emails that you send out to how you interact with your staff, to the posts that you send on LinkedIn, to the terminology and wording that you use on your website. You almost have to live the life of that brand to really ingrain it within the company. And it's one of those things that and you'll find this as you grow, but to maintain that culture within the business during the high growth stages is really difficult to do. But if you have embedded that sort of core brand in your culture from the early stages, it will really pay dividends later on. We have a client who is a plant-based food company, and they sign off all of their emails with peace and plants. It's like it's their kind regards. And I remember when I spoke to the founder there probably 5 years ago, I remember reading his email and thinking, look, that's weird. Because it is weird. It's a weird way to sign off an email. But it's one of those things that I've just remembered about that brand, and it then becomes the brand identity, and everything they do is about peace and plants, which is great. So it's things like that when you're building a brand and a culture, you need to have that little quirk that makes you stand out from the crowd. I think Stephen Bartlett, who I don't particularly like, but he mentions that a part of building a good brand is to have that shock culture within the business. So you can almost have 3 or 4 things within the business that are almost normal, but then that's that one thing that makes people go, "What the hell's that about? That's so unusual." And I think that really resonates with people and just makes you stick as a brand in their mind. So I think, talking about brand and culture, that's something that I'd almost encourage anyone to do, is just think of almost the weirdest thing you can think of your particular business doing and just do it. because it's one of those things that will resonate with everyone. So, as I said, I found that lesson quite late. Yeah,
How
that's
have you
one thing
applied it? What's your weird thing?
well, it's weird. It's weird in our industry, I suppose. It's not that it'll feel completely normal to the rest of you, but I refuse to wear suits. It's just one of those things that we'll never do, and that correlates, I suppose, when we get invited to award ceremonies or big insurer events. It's like we don't wear suits. It's just our thing, and we went to a big insurance event last May, and we all turned up in hoodies. And it's what everyone remembered us from that day, because everyone was in their blue suits and brown shoes and stupid attire like that. But we just refused, and it kind of made us stand out. So, like I said, it's not unusual to anyone else in the room, but to us, it's an outlier, I suppose, in the industry right now. We also have a statue of a gorilla in the office, called Bruce. That's pretty weird. He's been our brand mascot for a little while, completely random. First thing I saw in Home Sense when I think I was looking for content for the office. So there's little things like that. But otherwise, I suppose we're not too weird just yet.
Do you think they're like, I'm going to call it edginess. It's not, like you said, it's not that edgy, but it's edgy for your industry. Do you reckon that's helped you win customers that are startups? Because I guess you've got a thing where insurance, you still need to have a trusted relationship, and people might not trust a new entrance into the market. And even the established insurers, like especially during COVID, they broke a lot of trust because some of the policies weren't COVID proof or something, and everyone started
Yeah.
talking about it. So do you reckon part of your winning clients in this kind of market, that you need to have trust, has come down to brand a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's a big there's a very fine line between being edgy and appearing juvenile. And that's kind of a line that we skirt quite a lot. Um, when I was working for a couple of older insurance brokers a while back, we were very paper files, and it was just a really difficult place to work. And at the time, I was thinking like, but why is no one doing this and being slightly cool about it, or why is no one appealing to the market that they're looking to try and attract as customers? And for us, it was just really simple. It's like, if we want to attract customers, like of scale ups and tech companies and food companies, it just made sense for us to just act like our clients, because that's what they want to see. I think, I remember going out to a company in Manchester, had about 200 employees. They sold car finance, and it was my first big meeting actually as an account exec, something like 9 or 10 years ago. I remember sat down with my wife the night before, being like, "Oh my God, I've got this massive meeting tomorrow with a huge company. I've bought a new suit, shine my shoes." And I got there, and I remember being greeted at the door by the finance director, who was wearing super dry flip-flops and a pair of board shorts. And it was daft, right? Because I was trying to appeal to that market whilst turning up looking like I was going to audit the company with a clipboard, and it was silly. So since then, I guess we've just tried to meet our clients on a level, but ultimately still provide products and services and solutions that match their requirements. So I think that's definitely been important for us to do it that way.
Yeah. And you found that you've been able to like build trusted relationships as well. Like, have you had any issues overcoming that as a hurdle?
Not so much. I think we actually found where our hate came from was the insurance industry itself. We resonated quite well with our customers, but when we were talking to, I guess, our peers in the industry, if we can call them that, or yeah, some of our insurance underwriters, or the bigger brokers in the space, we were always seen as that sort of snotty little upstart that nobody liked, and we were always quite aggressive with our terminology, particularly against the insurance industry and its archaic nature. So I think the hate came from the industry, and I think that actually shows that you're doing something right. So I've never really been concerned about that, because after all, if everybody likes you, you're not disrupting, right? That's kind of the point of it. So we've definitely focused on that.
Yeah, fair enough. Just for context, where you mentioned how many clients you had, but where are you at now in terms of a business, like team size, any other metrics that are important to you?
Yeah, team size we're at 16 now, so we're not a massive company by any stretch. We are recruiting quite heavily throughout the rest of this year to meet I guess our internal growth objectives. But last year we finished the year with a decent profit, which was great. It means that we're able to reinvest that and do other things. We've sponsored a fair few things at the start of this year in our target demographic, like the Focal Pitch Day, which just finishing up. We've got some podcasts and stuff we're working with too. So we are still in the stage of reinvesting all of our profits to help us grow. We have been approached for funding again. We are thinking about it, but it's still I guess it's still in my nature to look at the term sheets just before accepting something something that could help us grow. So yeah, we've partnered with, I think we're going to talk about partnerships in a sec, but we've partnered with some big names. We've got really strong support from Hiscox, who are probably widely regarded as one of the best insurers in the UK, particularly in this space. So we're doing all right. We've done all right considering, I think is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, this is kind of in line with raising investment, but I think it's important anyway for founders. So one of the things that we do for our cohorts is we ask them to identify one or two metrics that are really important to them, and then they're tracking it as they go through the program. And we did a whole session a couple of weeks ago on making sure that was top of the funnel, so where the value exchange is between your potential user and you as a business. So and people are doing this because they think it will make a conversation with investors easier. But I guess the question for you is, have you been doing that anyway, just to keep yourself accountable? And what metric or metrics have you been focused on?
Yeah, I mean, without doubt, our most important metric within the business is customer retention. As you guys can attest to, right? The business that you have now, last year, you've likely grown or things have changed an awful lot. Well, most of our customers are at that seed Series A stage. They've typically raised and are going through a strong growth phase. And what that looks like for us is that when we speak to a customer in year one, they might pay insurance premiums of 400 or 500 quid. When we talk to them in year five, and we've got clients that can attest to this, they're paying us over £100,000 for their insurance premiums because of the size and scale at which they've grown. So for us, as long as we retain our customers, we grow by proxy. We are riding coattails of our clients, and I make no bones about that. I wish all of our growth was due to things that we were doing, but actually a lot of it is just due to our clients being successful as well, which is fantastic. So as long as we retain those customers and they continue to grow and we support them on their growth journey, then we grow as well. So at the close of last year, our customer retention was 96%. And that includes companies that have gone into liquidation. So we are doing something right because all of the customers that we have that have survived, we've typically retained, which has meant that we've grown as a result. So that's without doubt our most important metric. And the majority of focus, particularly as we're bootstrapped, is around that retention of customers. And I think that should be that should resonate with a lot of you, because I think as long as you retain your customers and continue to grow and nurture those relationships, it makes it so much easier to win than if you're constantly having to replace customers year after year.
Yeah, makes total sense. We're going to move to Q&A shortly. So if you do have a particular question, might be a R&D tax story, I don't know, sharing a woe, or a question about bootstrapping or anything else, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. Like you said, we're just going to talk about partnerships really quickly, because that seems to be, from what I've spotted, one way that you've grown quite quickly. So can you talk a bit about that, as whether it's a strategy or how it's come about?
Yeah, so actually partnerships for us was one of those things that we really had to work on getting right. And we definitely partnered with businesses in the early stages where we mutually used each other's name to get some clout on socials. I think let's just be completely transparent with that. Naturally we intended to share customers and get those sort of mutual cross referrals working, but it doesn't always work like that. And what we quickly realized that to have common grounds with a partner isn't enough. You can share mutual clients and fish from the same pool, and and have a need to help each other. But unless you're adding true value in the supply chain for everyone involved, there's no real inclination for them to constantly and repeatedly mention your name in conversation. So what we focused on was again something I'd read, but it was about building fans and not followers. If you're constantly building followers, it might kind of translate to the odd like here and there, and you might have someone go, "Oh, I remember these guys actually. Yeah, they were quite cool." Whereas actually, if you build a whole bunch of fans, what you've got then is people sort of actively talking about your business because they love what you're doing and love the reason that you're doing these things. So for us, it was always about building fans. So every partner that we work with, we want them to be fans of ours and we want to be fans of theirs so that we can really talk and be passionate about getting them involved in what we're doing. We've recently announced a partnership with ULife, who are shortly about to be, I think, one of the UK's first life insurance unicorns, which has been great for us. But the mutual passion there was that we both hated insurance as much as one another, that we wanted to change something about it. Theirs was life insurance, ours was business insurance, which is, naturally it kind of marries in anyway. But we have to have the same objectives, right? We were both sustainable. We both have a customer centric outlook on how we want to deliver insurance, and that was the reason why it was great for us to partner with them, because we could really passionately talk about what they were doing in similar industries, but obviously slightly conflicting paths. So that was always super key for us, and I think that'll hopefully retain throughout the next few partnerships that we're announcing too.
Any other tips on how you made fans, not followers? Maybe not through partnerships, but any direct relationships that you've got with clients?
Yeah, I suppose just meeting them on the level. I've spoken already about just meeting them on common ground and having common interests. And for us and all of our advisors here is that we want them to understand what it's like to grow and build a business, which is, I guess, it's uncommon when you speak to most insurance brokers or their employees. It's almost one of those things where you speak to them and they rattle from a script and complete a tick box exercise with you, whereas what we've tried to ingrain here is that we really want to get to the depths of the businesses that we're working with, find out about their pain points and their problems and what their growth journey looks like, how we can help them on that process. Insurance is almost an aside to that. We're way more interested in them helping them grow and achieve things. And I think that has naturally resonated with them to then speak to their friends about us, to other businesses that they've got, and that was really important, I think, for us. And we've always kind of worked on the adage that insurance brokers of yesteryear, kind of, they speak to you once a year, they take the commission from you and earn a fee, and you'll speak to them next year unless you have a claim. Whereas we're speaking to our clients once a quarter without fail to help them grow and to discuss certain things. So yeah, that's been a big part of it for us.
Yeah. I'll move into questions in 1 minute. Just one last question from me, which is, I'm just asking out of interest for myself, really.
Sure.
I think a lot of small businesses want to support other small businesses. So I, as a founder, would much rather take an insurance policy from you as a small business where you're the founder than like a larger company, because I want to support you, because I think we can relate to each other and we know what it's like building up a brand from scratch, etc., etc. But one thing that I've heard is that as your team grows, founders always want to deal with the other founder, and it's difficult to then have the brand is not entirely you as an individual, but all of a sudden I now have to speak to a team member. Have you found that happen for you, that people want to talk to you because you're the founder, and then when it comes to dealing with your team, there's a bit of a struggle?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I've been definitely guilty of spreading myself a bit too thin in that regard. We've definitely had to put in place working practices that allow for almost a cascade effect of work. Is that if I can speak to founders on a level and give them advice and do little bits with them, but ultimately the legwork, the broking, the pricing up, the documentation have to be done by someone else. So it's definitely been a challenge, and right now it's a challenge that we're overcoming because we're still of a certain size that allows me to do that. But and this goes back to my earlier point, my voice needs to be replicated down the chain as we go to other employees. So it's why I'm so keen on making sure that they can understand what it's like to grow a business and what it really means to be a startup. And I'm, in our office now, they're probably listening to all of this, but I sit in a very open plan office. I don't lock myself away. We want everyone to hear everyone else's conversations so that we can all learn at the same time. There will be a critical mass where we're unable to do that for sure, and it's a challenge that we'll have to address at the time. But I think we're doing all right so far, I think.
Phil, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, thanks, Steve, for your time. Really interesting and engaging. Now, this is a bit of a random question, but it's like not all bootstraps are equal. So the company that I founded is very much bootstrap. We've been going for a year, entirely funded by ourselves, and we're looking for a relatively small amount of money to help us grow. And what you've been talking about really resonates with me because I've got zero interest in. I've spent my life in corporate world. I really don't want to go back into that. I have zero interest in having somebody on the board telling me what numbers I have to hit every week. And I recognize that comes with significant funding. So my question is, at what stage, how much funding did you get? Presumably, we haven't got any, but we need some to grow, and you recognize that challenge. So how far were you able to get down the path before you became self-reliant?
Yeah, good question. It's one of those things. I'm always conscious that there's a bit of smoke and mirrors about how we got to where we were going. And for context, I left a six-figure salary to start Fueled. I had savings put aside. It wasn't as much as I needed. Be transparent with that. And to go from that to 12 grand a year, I think was what I ended up taking in the first year or so was difficult for sure. So it was it's a war story that involves loans and credit cards that got us to a stage where we suddenly started to break even and then move forward with that. And I don't, she won't mind me speaking for her as well, but my wife was not happy about having to take that step back at the time to then move forward in a slightly different way. And I've got two young kids as well, just for context. So it definitely was a war story, and there was luck and there was judgment involved. But I think if we, in terms of loans, there was around about 70K. In terms of credit cards, there was around about 15. So it was maxed to what I could get to then help us grow into what we are now. I'm now debt free, by the way. So that's
yeah.
So we did it. We made it, guys. So yeah.
Maybe your next chat should be about how to fund your own growth, because that's quite a challenge. But thank you for that.
And I'll just talk on that slightly as well whilst you brought it up. I alluded to it at the start as well. It's no secret that insurance is one of those things that everybody needs. So my prior role was in insurance. After a 6 and 12-month-ish covenant period, I was able to reapproach some of my old clients and bring them over into what is the new company. So for me, it wasn't as difficult as having to start from scratch and going out and getting new customers and really having to try and bring people with me, because there was trust built there before in what I'd done prior in a prior role. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do that, because I understand that those first few customers can always be your most difficult. For that context, and if you are going to bootstrap, is what I would I'd absolutely encourage you to do is before just making that snap decision to go and found something and to go and do this and to go and spend money on this, is to really think about what clients can help you by that. If I bring in this, can I then pay for that? If this happens, can that happen? So it's almost about being so you need to be so laser focused with your finances if you're bootstrapping. You need to understand where every penny is going. And I'm still like it to this day, which I know pisses off loads of people when things need to be bought or things need to change. But focusing on what money equals for you within the business is super, super important. And I definitely advocate that if you're going down the bootstrap path.
Yeah, that's good discipline. Thanks. Appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
I also think what you just said about credit cards and loans is quite important, because we speak to quite a lot of founders that aren't prepared to risk any of their own money, but they want to risk an investor's money. So they'll happily take a bunch of VC money, but then if you ask them whether they would get a loan, they say no. Like, and then that makes you think, if you're an investor, that they don't actually have confidence in their own business. Because if you're not going to take a loan or a credit card, that, to me, that signals that you're not confident that you're going to be able to pay it off, which means you're not confident in your business model. But then you're going to ask somebody else to give you money. I don't know if you've had any, like, any.
Yeah, I have always told myself it doesn't matter what the situation was, it only gets better from here, right? So when I decided to start the business, it was one of those things where I was like, well, look, if I go and start a business and it fails, what's the worst that's happened? I go back to rented accommodation. Cool. I was in rented accommodation at the time. Didn't really care about that. I would have acquired some customers that I could then go and leverage to get a paid position somewhere else. I would have gained additional experience. There was way more positives in failing than what I thought there was going to be. And I think that you can always put a spin on those things, right? Where like you can get so caught up in the, oh, but what if this happens and everyone will think less of me and this, that, and the other. But there's none of that really when you think about it. There's only positives to failing really. When we're talking about building a business, there's only positives to failing, because you take that experience on with you to the next thing that you do, and the next thing you do, and the next thing you do. Some of the best founders in the world now with the biggest businesses are ones that have failed at least 2 or 3 times before they've got to where they are. It's about that sort of persistence and refining what you're doing. You know, like I said, I'm incredibly fortunate right now that my first business is doing all right, and I've done things mostly right, some wrong. But ultimately it's definitely been about that. It's just not losing focus of what the positives are in any situation. So that's what I would take away from that.
Yeah, I think one of the things, like some of the big failures that we've seen recently might have even been in part due to VCs, because there's like this mass hiring boom, especially from people that were taking money in like 2019, 2021. And the VCs basically wanted them to spend money as quickly as possible to essentially succeed fast or fail fast. And they didn't want you to like spread the money out over a long period of time. So they're like mass hiring, mass firing, making wrong decisions about who to hire, what roles, what people, do they create a toxic environment? Like there's so much that can go wrong from taking huge amounts of money, as well as like the opportunity to spend it well.
And I think that you're seeing that loads now with the amount of down rounds that are being done, or bridge rounds to lead to other things. And it's been purely driven by that sort of FOMO around raising money, which I definitely got caught up in. Like I'll hold my hands up to that. You know, like I said, we were very fortunate to walk away from that without taking capital at the time, because I do think that would have been pretty damaging for us to do so, to then have to raise again. And we now see in the market that, you know, just because you've raised money the first time round, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to raise it again, even if you're doing well. You know, VCs have changed their stance on fundraising so much now, particularly as they've been burnt over the last few years with these high valuations and low returns. You know, just like I said, you know, we could have got given £1 million and then we still would have been met with the same objections, when we went out to raise again. Yeah, insurance is boring. You haven't grown as much as you thought you were going to do, this, that, and the other. I think it would have been pretty bad. So, like I said, I'm not trying to deter anyone from funding. I just think that there are other options, and there's certainly a smart way to then go and to go and to do it. I think that looking at things now, you know, as a profitable business with product market fit, doing really good things in the insurance industry with what I hope to be a strong brand, we're in a much better position to take on capital now. I think we do loads better with it than what we would have done before. So I'm not ruling out capital ever, but I'm just saying that at the time, the failures only made us stronger, I think.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a way that you can kind of do a hybrid. So rather than 100% relying on external capital or 100% relying on bootstrapping, you could actually raise less, you know, giving away less equity, and then kind of like having that bootstrapping mindset at the same time. So you're building a sustainable business, or attempting to kind of get profitable earlier, reinvest that profit into scale. So you have slightly more control. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
well, I think that's the golden egg that angels provide. I think if you find yourself a good angel with good sector knowledge and wants to back the founder and believes in the founder and what they're doing, as long as you're transparent and open about what you then, you know, going to go and spend the money on and how you wish to deploy it, Like I said, that first angel that we took a small amount of money from, and it was circa 100K there or thereabouts at the time. We didn't spend it for 18 months because we were already break even by that point, or we were trying to be break even as much as possible. And you know, I was just transparent with the angel at the time, being like, we're taking this on to make sure that we get through COVID and we have light at the end of the tunnel, and we have a fallback plan if the world really does go to shit. So there are hybrids available, but it really does come with angels and specific angels. I think that from what I've seen of angel groups in particular as well, I don't think they're that great. There's some angel groups in Bristol, which is where we're fairly close to, that you've got angels that put in 5 or 10K as a group. None of them had any particular value, and they put in terms that mean that you're still stuck with them and their group that they've created. Whereas you know, that single investor in your wheelhouse that's in your sector that appreciates you and what you're doing is way more powerful, I think, than any VC or angel group by themselves can be.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions, by the way? Because if not, I'm just going to keep chatting about
there's been a few put in chat, but I haven't been reading it, I must admit.
I think people were kind of adding some comments. I mean, Darren asked whether there's a special hotbed discount that you can provide.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I can do that. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you know, we 10% or a month free, something like that. We can work on something like that.
Out of interest, who here actually has business insurance? By show of hands. Emoji.
I wouldn't think anything less of you if you didn't have it, by the way.
Because we were talking about people get it, like, was there like a time prompt where you needed to get it and therefore you got it, or was it part of just the process of setting up the operations of the business? And feel free to take yourself off mute and just shout out why you got it, whether it was a requirement or not.
Sure.
Yeah, I had something. So basically, when I was asking for angel investors pre-seed round, one angel investor said to me, if you don't have a key person insurance, I'm not going to invest. Because if something happens to you, because I'm a solo founder, basically they would say, I need to have money that will allow me to hire 5 of people that you are covering now, so then we can carry on with the business. So I had to do the insurance for that reason.
Yeah, and that's incredibly common when funding is concerned. In fact, you know, we ended up building an insurance policy, which is the directors and officers and key man insurance combined, so that when a company raises, they just have to buy the one rather than source it from 2. That was the concept anyway. And that's definitely, you know, it's such a key indicator of when a company needs insurance. As soon as someone comes in and goes, hey, if something happens to you, my investment's effectively dead in the water, right? So, so that was definitely a key inflection point. There's also certain industries that require you to have insurance before you get trading. Us, for example, being financially regulated, we need to have PI in place, PI insurance. So we have to buy that. There are other industries that stipulate the same. There's marketing shows, you know, the food markets and the like that say now that if you have to attend, you have to have a minimum level of public liability. There's a whole range of indicators that can mean that you buy insurance at a certain time. But ultimately, and what we've definitely found is that insurance is bottom of the pile. You know, unless someone tells you to raise, it's one of those things that, like, I'll get around to it when I get around to it, or I'll get around to it when someone tells me I need it. So I don't think any less of anyone for not getting insurance if you haven't got around to it yet. Ultimately, you yourselves will know when risk starts to occur within the business. And like I said, you know, it's one of those things where as soon as you get given someone else's money, that's almost like this sort of knee-jerk fear factor, like, oh shit, what if something goes wrong? This is someone else's money now that I'm playing with rather than my own. So that's normally a good indicator, but there's so many different others.
Yeah, makes sense. Darren, was this about your personal situation or a question? Doesn't matter either way. Oh, you're on mute.
That's the second time. There won't be a third. I just going to say, Steve, yeah, it's honestly really refreshing to hear such transparency and honesty. It's just been brilliant. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We don't have insurance in any way, shape, or form. I've got personal insurance, clearly, but as a business, we've just literally started to work in partnerships. One of those partnerships is for public sector work, and they're a very, very large, well-established charity. And I get that back-to-back agreement stipulates that we have to have relevant insurance in place, and that's predominantly the only reason we're approaching it. And I mean, just out of curiosity, from your experience, for a sort of fairly new startup technology-based business, what's the typical sort of associated cost that we should be looking at?
Yeah, well, it's obviously really difficult for me to price up without knowing the full situation. But what I would say is that the way in which we've always worked with our clients is on relevance, right? I think if you go to the sort of the older, more traditional insurance brokers, they'll look at your business as a whole and they kind of go, well, we need to insure this, we need to insure this, we need to insure this, and it'll cost you X. What we tend to focus on is, well, what's your risks now? What's the size of your business now, not what it's going to be. And you know, the policies that we provide are all very flexible and to the minute almost as to what risk you represent. You know, your very first liability policy, if you've got a couple of employees and just need some public liability, you're probably looking at £200 a year. It's not going to be a lot at all. But when you start working with public sector and larger corporates, they insist that you have cyber insurance. They insist that you have professional indemnity insurance, particularly if you're exchanging data or you're providing them with the professional services. That's where the price can start getting slightly more expensive. But what we always try and do, and what I'd encourage you to do as well, is if something feels bigger than it needs to be, just push back. There's no reason for you to adhere to a 5 million professional indemnity limit when your contract with them's 30k, because the risk just isn't represented in the insurance that they're asking you to purchase. We have it all the time where we get sent a contract and it's like, look, we need 10 million cyber insurance in the USA. Can you do us a price for that? And the first thing we normally say is, well, how many customer data records are you holding for US citizens? And it's 10. Like, it's pointless. It's a pointless purchase. So then we kind of get involved in that sort of trade-off where, like, well, can we start it at 100k and then increase it to 10 million as the customer data records start coming in? So it's all relevant to you and what you are now and what risks you represent now. And again, if I could spread a message throughout this, is that when you're contracting for the first time, this is to anyone in the room, just make sure that that's in your back of your mind, because public sector in particular, NHS is another one, they'll all take the piss with the limits that they ask you to get. So really focus on maintaining a solid level for what you need rather than what they're asking you to get.
Thank you. Any last questions for Steve? Feel free to raise your hand. Someone has asked on the chat how much funding you received prior to failing on the investor cycle, if you're happy to share that.
Yeah, as I said, you know, it was like 70 to 80k in loans and credit cards and stuff. That was kind of the main sort of self-funded element of it. And then mentioned the 100k angel investment in Feb 2020. So that was it. That then took us into the funding round that we didn't proceed with. So that was the full metrics.
Harry.
Hey, Steve.
Hey.
That was brilliant. Thank you. This is a really pointless question. But why have you got rid of all your experience on your LinkedIn page, given I thought it would be relevant? Because I'm battling with this myself at the moment, right? Our startup is absolutely nothing to do with my sort of professional experience, but I've kind of kept it up there for the moment. But I'd have thought yours was relevant. Why have you wiped it all?
It's a really good question, and to be completely honest, I don't know. I went through a stage, I suppose, of talking about the company I was at prior in reasons that led us to then do what we're doing now. And I think it was more protecting them than me. As you know, if there were instances where we were micromanaged, the hours were horrific. My first child was born during that period and I got 1 week paternity that wasn't paid. It was just a really horrific experience working for them at the time. And I spoke, I've always been quite open and transparent, particularly with growing a business. I think it's super important for an insurance broker to lead with transparency too, right? Because the insurance industry can kind of conjure up those images where it's just like, they're not very trustworthy, they're not on our side, they're not going to battle for me if something goes wrong, whereas we're the opposite of that. So subconsciously I believe it was probably that reason why. It was more protecting prior employees than it was myself.
Thanks.
What are you going to do, Harry? Are you going to keep yours on?
Well, I'm in a bit of a tricky one at the moment where so similar to you, I work in finance and I've been funding the business myself. I sort of took the leap about a month ago to go all in. But if I'm honest, there's a scenario where if we don't raise or if we don't, take on some of your advice about, bootstrapping and loans and all that, I might have to go back to work to keep funding the business further forwards. So I kind of, as much as I would love nothing more than to be on my LinkedIn screaming, shouting about everything we're doing.
Sure.
I don't want to shoot myself in the foot if I have to swallow that pill to go and get a job again to help us drive the business forwards.
Interesting quandary.
Yeah.
Okay, any last minute questions? If not, we will say thank you and goodbye to Steve. We'll post your LinkedIn profile in the chat as well, so you can all follow Steve, put some interesting content out on LinkedIn about bootstrapping and press and all that other good stuff.
Yeah, sure. And, like I said, the floor's open to anyone. So if you just want to drop me a message and follow up with a 30-minute just to make what I've said, I suppose, a bit more relevant to you and your business and how you're going about things, just let me know. I'll happily grant time to anyone. So
really appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll stop recording now. Take care. Bye. Myself and Emma